right, we're going to get started now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to CCIA and KayaPush's webinar on employee turnover. We're very happy that you joined us today. If you don't know me, my name is Michaela Sweatt. I am on the CCIA Board of Directors. CCIA is the California Cannabis Industry Association. We are the largest voice for cannabis. We're the largest cannabis association in the state of California. We support all license types as well as businesses that support those license types here in California and advocate for smart legislation and regulation and are against overregulation that we're all experiencing now. I am also a cannabis industry consultant focused on California. CCI is very excited today to have Tommy Truong here. He is the founder and CEO of KayaPush, and KayaPush is also a CCIA member. And we're happy to have Tommy and KayaPush here to talk about employee turnover, which is something that can be very expensive for your business. And it's very important. I might add, for customer retention as well. If they like your employees, they're more likely to come back into your store. So welcome, Tommy. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Okay, sorry guys. My name is Tommy. I'm co-founder and CEO of KayaPush. Just a little bit about us. We help thousands of entrepreneurs grow and scale their business. We are live nationwide and have over 6,000 businesses on our platform today. So today, what I want to go over is how the top companies in our platform, the companies that we work with, what are they doing to solve employee turnover? And then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening right now with the PAGA reforms, which is really good news for businesses in California. So I talked to
Tommy, one moment. I think we have an issue. We might not be able to see your screen.
Oh, you guys can? One second.
I think it's just the Zoom update. You do have to click on the top in order to see his screen.
Can you guys see it? No? Give me one
I can
second.
see it.
Can you guys see it now? Are you guys good?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry about that. You would think that being the founder of a technology company that we would have our technology down, but things happen.
Indeed, they do.
So I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot. We work with thousands, but personally, I've talked to hundreds. And the number one question, or the first question I always ask entrepreneurs is, why should your employees care? Why? And the businesses that have the highest engagement, the lowest turnover, have always thought about this question and have an answer, or at least are working towards an answer to really, really address this question is, why should your employees care? Right? You care as a business owner, as a manager, you've invested millions of dollars in your business, but wouldn't it be great if your employees cared just half as much as you? And that's what we're gonna be talking about today. So Ray Dalio, a really famous investor, he talks about that in any business in the world, if you think about businesses in general, there's really just three pillars. You have your customer, you have your product, and you have your people. And I argue that your people is really the foundation of your business, because at the end of the day, it's your employees that are the ones that are talking to your customers. They're the ones that are implementing your customer strategy and your product strategy. So if you have a strategy, if you have a people strategy, everything would fall through. So let's talk a little bit about small elements of people strategy. And we can't talk about reducing employee turnover unless we talk about employee engagement, right? It goes hand in hand. The best companies that we talk to, the best firms, are the ones that are very intentional with employee turnover. So it really starts off with who you hire. And I don't have enough time in this webinar to talk about how to hire. We'll leave that for a future webinar with the CCIA. But I do want to talk about who you hire. That's equally as important. There is and I agree, there's a need for companies to staff hardcore cannabis users. And, we call them like the OG employees, the ones that consume a lot of cannabis because they have a really strong product knowledge, and they're the ones that can guide customers with strong product knowledge. But it's equally as important, and the best firms have this, to staff professional salespeople, or at least people that have the intention to be a professional salesperson in the future. It's so important that you have a good mixture of these type of individuals in your company. So the first start is crafting your ideal candidate profile. So background, industry, future ambitions, and the best companies hire employees that are ambitious and that are growth oriented. That employees that have a clear direction of where they want to be in 5 years and have the ambition, really the drive to get there. And it's what we've seen is, if you have employees that want to get into this, be professional sales or in customer service, it serves really well because you can drive this ambition into different areas of your business. So it really starts with who you hire. That is half the battle. A little tidbit too, and I don't want to get too far into this, is you only really have, if you think about the employee experience and employee engagement, it starts with who you hire, but it really also starts from day one. The first day employees come on board, what is their experience with the company? Because this dictates whether or not you're working uphill or you're working downhill, and you only have one opportunity to make the first impression. And for us, this actually has really helped us, is we send everybody on our team first day a care package that has hats, swag, all of these things, and you'll be surprised at how affordable this is to businesses. What we did, and we should continue doing, because we did before COVID, was the founders would write a personalized note on every new employee's care package, just really congratulating and thanking them for joining the team and how excited we are for working with them. And that has really gone a long way. I remember talking to our HR manager and getting feedback that this, by far, the most positive comments that we have in a care package was a personal note like that. Okay, the biggest challenge that companies face, and I want to reiterate this, is why should your employees care? Why? Why should they care? And I think this problem it's harder in the cannabis industry, because if you think about the cannabis industry in general, and we'll talk about the Budtenders, is it's generally entry level, part-time, mostly. It's a non-career role. You're paying your team very close to minimum wage, and they're the ones that are responsible for all of your sales and all of your customer interactions, but the margins aren't high enough for them to get a commission, right? Other retail outlets at least have commission. We, unfortunately, in our industry, we don't generally. So why should they care? Why should your employees not just clock in and clock out? Why should they have a vested interest in the business? And this is really the problem that every single entrepreneur should really think through, because it tremendously not only impacts employee turnover, but it also impacts your bottom line. And what we found in every single business that we talk to that have somewhat figured this out, is that they care back. So why should your employees care? Well, it's because as a business, we care about our employees. And that's the rule of reciprocity. And so what we found really works really well is first day your employees get hired, as a business owner, pull them aside and ask them, what do you want to be in 5 years? Right? How can we leverage our business? First, what do you want to be in 5 years? What are the skill sets that you need to get to where you need to go? And how can we as a business leverage our company to get you the skill set to set you up for your career, whether it's in these four walls or outside of these four walls? And the companies that are doing this are the ones that have the most engaged staff. And what we found actually really interesting is if you hire employees that want to go in sales and that want a career and influence people, it's really easy to tie this into what the business needs. Because at the end of the day, if you want to be in sales, you have to be able to influence people. If you want to be anything, if you want to own your own business, if you want to be a future manager, if you want to do anything in your career, you have to be really good at influencing people. And that's a skill set that can be built as a budtender, because as a budtender, you're talking to people and you're influencing them on what to purchase. So it's a really great way to what we always see is if you can tie in what an employee wants in their career, what the skill sets that need to develop, to what the business needs, magic happens, because that's really truly when magic happens. The other problem that we see that companies solve is the problem of growth, promotion, because as a dispensary, you don't really have that many roles to fill in terms of a promotional role, right? You have a team of budtenders and you may have a team lead and a manager, and where do budtenders go? And what we find is companies that have really solved the growth problem have tackled this head on, because growth does not necessarily mean promotions. Growth means increase in skill set. Growth means really a platform or an arena for companies to help employees increase the skill set that they need for their careers. And so really that's really increasing the responsibilities, right? And the autonomy. So having your employees take part in recruiting, training, for example, purchasing product. If you have an employee that is passionate about the product that you have in their shelf, that is one plugged in individual, right? And spend some time to accumulate this. So promotions offer as well, and sales campaigns. So there's so many different areas to expose your business to employees to increase the skill set that they need for their future, and in turn will help your business grow as well. What we find is engagement equals ownership. The most engaged team has the most ownership in the business. I'll tell you the story. I was talking to Rich the other day. Rich, one of our clients he operates Days Cannabis, a fairly prominent brand in the East Coast. And he was telling me the story about how he felt when he saw his employee see loose paper on the floor, pick it up and throw it in the garbage. And he's like, our employees treat this business like it's theirs. And what an amazing feeling to have as a business owner, to see your employees plugged into the business as much as you and care about the business as much as you. And what I find over and over and over again when I talk to business owners that have a really high performing, high functioning team is that all of them have these four elements in place. They involve their team in key decisions in the business. Rich, for example, the owner of Days, when he goes out and looks for the next location to open his stores, he brings his managers and he involves his managers in the decision of the business. That's a huge decision. But he's very intentional with increasing the ownership that employees have in his business. So he makes sure that the decisions that he has in his business is transparent, and he includes his employees. He also has an environment that fosters growth. When you hire A players, they want to be challenged and they want to always be growing. So another example is that he had an employee that really wanted to manage their company's social media, and she was an A player. She was plugged in, really one of the top salespeople they had. So he added this responsibility to her, right? Gave her the autonomy to run their social media, but also held her accountable to certain metrics. And since doing so, their social media has thrived because he had the right person and he hired an ambitious person and had the right person in the right seat doing the right things in the business. And then finally, transparency. If you want your employees to have ownership in your business, they cannot be left in the dark when things happen. That is death of ownership, right? If you think about it. So you just have to be transparent. You have to be in front of the news. Is there something big that's going to be happening in the business? You can't shield that from your employees because ultimately they will find out. I remember working as an accountant at M&P. It's a national firm. And before that, I worked at a mid-sized firm as a CPA. And there was murmurs that we were going to be sold, or I guess merged into M&P. And these rumors happened for 4 to 5 months until it was announced by the partnership team. And I just remembered just being really in the dark with my coworkers, and us just talking about this rumor for 4 to 6 months until it happened. And I did not feel like I was involved in anything of the business, right? There's no ownership in that. I didn't feel engaged in the business. And just thinking about what they could have done differently if it were to happen, and there were rumors going around, they could have gotten in front of it and addressed it in the business so that people feel a little bit more involved. So time and time again, when I talk to entrepreneurs and I talk to businesses on our platform, the ones that have the lowest turnover, the highest form of engagement, have these 4 traits in common. They involve their team in decision making. They hire the right team members, so people that are growth oriented, people that are ambitious. They put them into a situation where it's challenging, where they're building their skill set. And here's a caveat to this too. If you hire ambitious people, you need to have a very good manager because they're more demanding of the manager, right? So you also have to have a strong management team in order to execute this strategy. They give their employees autonomy to take on different things in the business. I always think about, and you think about just scaling a business in general, you can scale. One key element of scaling your business is when you first start your business. And always, it's interesting because Maria and Spencer are on this, so they'll a part of my team and they'll hear this for the first time. When we first started our business, we were the jack of all trades, master of none. So I did everything. And in order to really truly scale, you bring on employees that are smarter than you, that are more capable than you, and you relieve yourself of that responsibility because I'm not a master at anything. And in turn, they become sorry. And then in turn they become responsible for it. And I always picture myself as an octopus with many different arms, and each arm is an A player that we brought on. And yeah, so the most important, the businesses that have scaled the most are the ones with these four traits. I want to talk a little bit about culture and really what that means, because it all really ties down to culture. And if you Google corporate culture, you get a bunch of jargon that doesn't make any sense at all. In my opinion, culture are the words that your employees use to describe your business. And the more words that are used, um, the you get closer to what your culture is. As owners, you guys decide what the culture that you want your business to be, but it's really up to your employees to tell you what the culture actually is. When we first started our business 12 years ago, I worked at an accounting firm, and I hated my job. I completely hate it. I did not feel like I was making an impact at all. I didn't feel like I was growing, and I felt like I was just a number, right? I was there to pump up financial statements, and it was very unfulfilling. So when we started our business, we wanted to create an environment where people were having fun, they were being challenged, and that they felt like they were making an impact. So everything that we do from an employee experience perspective had these three words in mind. So every quarter, and this quarter just happened, so our team just did their surveys. We asked an external consulting firm to anonymously poll our employees, give us feedback on how we're doing, and tell us what are the three words that you would use to describe the business. So this was the last quarter's three words. And what you can see is fun is very prominent in this word map. But what's not very prominent is that it's challenging. And I don't really see impact at all. So what I want to just leave you guys with on this note is, what are the three words that you want your employees to describe your business? Write that down and be very intentional on creating elements in your business that can highlight these three words. And the blessing and the curse is that you'll never get there. It's a continuous grind and continuous movement to make sure that the three words live in your organization. So I want to quickly talk about the new PAGA reform that happened in July. So we have clients outside of California tell us all the time that, hey, we're planning on opening a location in California. And I always tell them, have you looked into the labor laws? And if you're a business in Nevada, for example, and you're moving to California, it can be a slap in the face if you don't understand the environment that you're getting into. Thankfully, that after July 1st, it's gotten better. And we're this new PAGA reform is going to really help businesses that are mindful on making sure that they're compliant with the complex laws in California. So just a quick summary. July 1st, 2014, the governor signed SB 92 and AB 2288 into law, which in summary reduces the potential payout in lawsuits by 85% of businesses, right, that are showing that they want to be compliant with California laws, and 70% after they've received a PAGA or demand letter if they've done significant improvements in their internal processes within 60 days of receiving that letter. So what does that mean for businesses in California, in our industry? And what should you guys do to ensure that if anything ever happens in the future, that you can get that 85% reduction? Because it can be devastating, and it has been devastating to businesses in not only our industry, but in general. The first is to make sure that you have written policies that comply with California Labor Code, i.e. a handbook that employees sign during the onboarding process, and it's updated and employees sign yearly. So this can be done, for example, on our platform where employees can sign handbooks before they start work, but as well as you can update handbooks and have employees sign yearly. And the one thing about California is that it's companies are assumed guilty until proven innocent. And really what that means is you have to prove to the state that you're doing these things, or it's assumed that you're not. And that's the crux of it, is that you have to ensure that you have documentation that you're doing this. So just make sure that first you do that. Second is that your handbook is updated yearly, at least yearly. I recommend semi-annual, because a lot of laws come out semi-annually, and that you have a law firm that you work with review these handbooks, and that you get your employees to sign. So that's the first one. The second step in to get the 85% reduction is that to prove to the government that you're conducting a payroll audit, i.e. you're auditing how you guys do meal breaks, rest breaks, timekeeping, overtime, and example is off the clock work. And that based on this audit, that you make corrections. So the trick is to audit, do the findings, and make corrections. And I want to emphasize that you need to prove that you've done these audits. So just as an example, right now is we're actually helping all of our clients in California do this audit with our platform. And we're also updating our platform to show that audits are being done and that there's a log of audits that are being done, because you need to in order to reduce any potential penalties and interest by 85%. So that's the second thing that you have to do. And then the third is provide regular wage hour training to your HR and to your supervisors and managers. And this has to be done when you've onboarded a new employee, a new manager, as well as at least every 2 years from onboarding. And we honestly recommend every year. So what does that look like? By providing training is document when trainings happen. If it's a video that you can easily upload into our platform, document that they've watched that video, which can be done. And also what you've gone through in terms of training them to be compliant with wage laws. And there's this really great saying is that you're only strongest to your weakest employee, in that all it takes is one employee, say a general manager, for example, to ask an employee to work off the clock, ask employees to check their email when they're not clocked in, or not give employees the proper rest breaks in order for things to spiral out of control. So it's really, really important that all of your managers are on here. And, I want to end with this point is just make sure that your platform that you're using provides you with the system and the peace of mind in place to know that laws are being abided by. Because, and I have this conversation a lot with our multi-unit operators, it's impossible to hire a general manager and managers that are great with employee engagement, employee turnover, hiring, talking to customers, customer strategy, and also be great at labor compliance. You're not talking about the same human, So it's so important that you rely on a system in place to make your people great. So with that, I will, leave some time left for questions if you guys have any.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tommy. That's some great information. One thing that I really loved was your word map. And what I really liked about that is that the words came from the employees themselves. I've worked for a lot of companies in my career, and the word maps often come from management and not employees. So I loved that. That is a good reminder that your culture really is your employees. The other thing for me that really stood out was the need for documentation. So in my consulting practice in cannabis, one of the things I talk about all the time is documentation, documentation, documentation. If you didn't document it, it did not happen. And so I think that relates to what you were talking about, especially here in California, that when it comes to employment matters, you are assumed guilty unless you prove yourself innocent. And so documenting at the time that it happened, the training that it took, have employees sign something that they completed the training, and all the things you went over for documentation, that also really stood out to me. So we do have a couple questions here. The question is, what is the best way to train my managers on California's labor laws? And how do I get them to care about labor law violations? That is a great question.
That is a really, really good question. I think there's a few things that you should approach this. And when you're doing an audit with internally in your business, it's you always have to think about what am I exposed to and what do managers are responsible for from a labor compliance perspective. So, and there's a lot of areas that managers can be responsible for, but I think that the number one thing is to sit back and make sure that the system that you're reliant more on the system to be compliant versus your managers to be compliant. I.e., as long as they follow the system that you have in place, that the business will be compliant. And what I mean by that is breaks, for example. That is probably the number one, if not two, reasons why PAGA lawsuits happen is meal breaks. And if you have a system in place that tells managers employees need to go in the break, and if employees don't need to go in break, you have a system in place to capture break waivers. Or if it's not voluntary, you have a system in place to pay employees their hour, and that just ensures that you have documentation in place and you're relying on the system. Because in some instances, you rely on the manager. You rely on the manager to get the break waiver. You rely on the manager to file break waivers in your cabinet and etc. and to pay employees. And because you're relying on managers to do these actions and you have 10 locations, it's really impossible to be compliant. So that's number one. Number two, and I think this is really important in terms of training, is why should employers care? Managers care is, and you would know this too, is if you hire the right managers that truly care about the people that they work with, they would want to make sure that everybody continues to have a job. And the penalties out there are so large, lack of a better word, that businesses cease to exist sometimes because of that. And I think that's just highlighting kind of the dire need for us to be compliant and not sugarcoating in any way. And then from a training perspective is anytime that you're adding in a new process, for example, say you're training your employees, well, a process and people are two sides of the same equation. Who do you have that's spearheading employee training? And is the person that you have spearheading employee training, are they qualified and do they have capacity? So I would first internally, most businesses don't have that. I would look externally for that. I would look for either a law firm or a consultant that you vetted, right? that has done this before that can help you with training and that can that you can learn from. Yeah. Don't take on training yourself is what I would say, because the risk is very high.
I think that's a great point, especially for a complex topic like labor law. Hiring an external law firm or expert in employment issues is well worth the money, because you're getting someone who's already experienced, obviously at in the topics, and it helps you avoid, fines or judgments against you. And it also demonstrates that you are making significant efforts to comply. So that's a really great suggestion. Kind of on a related topic, another question that came up is, how can KayaPush software help you stay compliant with these PAGA requirements? And if you would also just remind us what PAGA stands for.
Okay. PAGA, it's a very long California Private Attorney General Act. That's PAGA. And really what PAGA is PAGA allows employees to, lack of a better word, sue employers on behalf of the state. And that's essentially PAGA. So it's kind of like allowing employees to do a class action lawsuit against the employer, right, on behalf of the state. And the money that comes out of PAGA, it's paid to the state, and some of it's to the employee. So that's a little bit technical. And I always the number one recommendation that I have with employers is to always, whatever platform that you use, to ensure that you're system reliant versus people reliant. And that's where companies get in trouble. And how we help employers is that we built our platform with this very fact in mind, is that if you don't have things documented, it means that you didn't do it. Right. So everything that we've done is to ensure that if something happens in your business, you have things documented, and there's automations in place to help you get things done. So for example, when employees clock in, we know when employees should take their breaks, and managers have access to a roster on when employees should take their break. And if they don't take their break, we automate the digital signing of waivers. And if it's not voluntary, then we automate the payment of the penalty. That's just one example, right? That just ensures that from a break compliance perspective, that you have guardrails around. And the last thing you want to do is, one, have your managers decide when employees should take breaks. They're not going to remember. It gets busy, right? On the time frame within the shift that employees are able to. You don't want employees to sign manual copies of their break waivers, because where is that being stored? And you don't want to manually have to remember to pay employees the penalties. Yeah. So that's one area. And I think the other biggest area too, and particularly with the new reform that comes out, that has come out, is the tracking of when things were checked. So California, what they want is, they want to know how often do you check your labor codes? How often do you check your overtime, your meal, your breaks set up, all of these things. And if you have a system in place that documents when things are checked, and you have a partner in place that can help you check these things, that will go a long way.
Now, how long do you have to store employment records for? Because I was, as you were answering that question, I was thinking that particularly in dispensaries in California, they're often, most of the square footage of the space is dedicated to the customer and retail sales. They're often, small office areas, and they may not have a lot of room for paper file storage and things. So First, I guess the first question is, how long do the records have to be kept by a business? And then I guess I'm just assuming that KayaPush software automates that as well.
Yeah, so we do automate the storage of records, and we store our records forever, indefinitely. So that's one thing. I believe, and this is, I have to premises that this is, I haven't looked into this, so you should check on this. So please check if this is correct, because I'm 50% sure. Is one, the new reforms are, what's great about the new reforms is these infractions have to have happened, I believe, within the last year. So that's great, right? So I don't know how these new reforms impact what was previously, but what was previously is there are certain areas where they can go back 3 years. Yeah. So in best practice though is I would keep records for at least 7 years, to be honest with you. And just make sure that you have things in place.
Yeah, didn't mean to put you on the spot there, because obviously KayaPush is a national software company, so didn't expect you to actually remember all 50 states. Hey, what's the time frame in Florida? You have 5 seconds to answer. Kidding, of course. Well, I have one last question, but if anyone, any participant has any additional questions, one last chance to put your questions using the Q&A feature in the webinar software. But you know, what are the most common reasons that budtenders choose to leave?
Oh, that's a good question, because I mean, as I mentioned, the budtender role is it's an entry level role, so you're gonna expect high turnover, right? And that's kind of expected. And when you look at the national average of employee turnover, 55 annual and 30 within the first 2 months, I believe wholeheartedly that the 30% within the first 2 months cannot and should not happen in a well operating environment. That comes to wrong expectations and hiring the wrong team, right? And maybe your onboarding and training is not great, right? So that's number one. So if you have your staff leaving within the first 2-3 months of being hired, you do have to look at whether or not you have a structured hiring process. And what's interesting is, and what studies have found is, you're 5 times more likely to make a bad hire without a structured hiring process. So what is the structured hiring process? Candidate profile, which we talked about. How you interview. Do you have 2 interviewers? What do you ask? Right? How do you do reference checks? How do you onboard? That's a structured hiring process. So you're gonna have to dial that in. Outside of the first 2 months, it can be a varied array of reasons. And with us is hopefully they've outgrown the business. That is the best, right? You've hired an A player that wants a career in sales, and they've worked for the business for a year, 2 years. That fire is gonna burn bright, right? And they've left the business because they don't want to be like, maybe you're not growing fast enough. You don't have a position as manager, or maybe they want a career in sales, right? But the time that you have them is wonderful. And now you have a system in place to recruit more individuals like them, right? You cannot expect to run a dispensary and have 0 turnover, because that's not a good business either. Who do you have on staff? Right? No business has 0 turnover. And I think there's a happy mix of people leaving, but the reasons why they leave is what entrepreneurs should dial in on.
I love that. It's much better to have a budtender to have learned so much that their career is growing, rather than them to be upset or angry, and that being the reason. I think that is a very positive place for us to kind of close up here. There is one final question that came in, which is, will we get copies of the presentation? And I am told by your staff that yes, you will be providing copies of the presentation to all attendees. We have your email address, but so we can send, KayaPush can send the presentation. If you wish to, I think we have KayaPush's email address on another slide. If you wish to email KayaPush additional questions, do you have an email address? You want to advance the slide?
There you go. Contact.
Oh, well, there we go. KayaPush. You can email KayaPush at pushoperations.com. CCIA would love to have anyone who's on the call. If you're not a member, check us out. We have some a new membership type that allows just a single person for a very affordable annual price to join CCIA. If you're not connected with a company, you can reach out to me, or you can email info@cacannabisindustry.org for more information about joining CCIA. Thank you so much, Tommy, for joining us today. You provided people with some really great information on remaining compliant in California. It's very expensive if you don't.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Everyone, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time.